Continuing on with lesson 24, exercise 3, got part A, B, and C, and for each figure shown, we're going to represent the gray shaded region as a percent of the whole figure, and we're going to write our answer here as a decimal fraction in percent. So I'm going to move this up just a little bit. So as far as decimal fraction in percent, we'll kind of do something like this in this chart. So we're looking at figure A, and as a decimal fraction, and then as a percent, what is shaded. And I see, remember each column going down is 10, so that's 20. So as a decimal, we call that 0.20. We can read this as 20 hundredths. As a fraction, that's 20 out of 100, that's shaded, and as a percent, that's 20%. You'll see that the decimal and the percent look a lot alike. Picture B, what part's shaded. Even though they're two different shades of gray, that's still half of this, and so if the whole thing's 100, that'd be 50 that's shaded. So some people like to start with the percent, 50% shaded, that's 50 out of 100, and as a decimal, that's 0.50, or 50 hundredths. Sometimes you want to put a 0 in the front, sometimes we put a 0 behind it, sometimes we would just say 0.5 as a decimal. Same thing with this one over here with 20, you don't necessarily need the 0 in the front or behind it, but they're there. Picture C, I'll help you out. There's 48 blocks that are shaded, so that would be 48% out of the 100 shaded. That's 48 out of 100 as a fraction, 48 hundredths as a decimal. You can put the 0 in front, you don't necessarily need it, but 48 hundredths. What ratio is being modeled in each picture? In picture A, the ratio was 20 to 100. We were writing it 20 over 100. 20 would be the part that's shaded out of 100, the total. Move this up just a little bit. In part B, we had 50 to 100 as a ratio. You could write that 50 over 100. 50, again, is the part shaded out of the 100 total. And then part C was 48 to 100. And then that would be 48 out of 100 if you were to write it like a fraction. How are the ratios and the percentages related? So the ratios were out of 100, and so are percents. Percents are out of 100. And so we talk about a part out of a total is what your ratio is, and that's actually what your percent is. A percent is going to be this number out of 100. A percent is always out of 100. What was nice about these ratios is they were also out of 100. So a little note to the side, percents are out of 100. They're always out of 100. Even if I don't give you 100 questions on the test, your percent can still be out of 100. Ratios can be out of 100 as well. They don't have to be. They could be a different ratio, and then you could make it a percent out of 100. We're going to turn the page. Hopefully this next table helps you understand percents, decimals, fractions, ratios a little bit better. So on the back here, each relationship below compares the shaded portion, which would be the part, to the entire figure, which would be the whole, and then we're going to complete the table. So 6%, we need to figure out what that is as a decimal, a fraction, and as a ratio, and then how would we model it? So 6%, I know as a ratio is 6 out of 100. As a fraction, that's 6 out of 100. As a decimal, that's 6 hundredths. So you could write it as 6 hundredths. Be careful that you put a 0 here, 6 hundredths. Otherwise, if you put 0.6, that's actually 60. So how do you make your decimal or a percent into a decimal? You take your percent, and the decimal is currently behind it, and you just move it 2 to the left, and it would now be here. So you would fill this in with a 0. So that's how you can see 6% in a decimal. What would the model look like? You would just shade 6 blocks out of 100. We're not going to draw that. The next example is 60%. So what would that be as a decimal, fraction, ratio? 60% as a decimal, we think about moving it over twice, and it moves the decimal this way. So now we've got 0.60. The numbers look a lot alike, except for this is the decimal, so it's like the decimal's in front of it. That's 60 out of 100 as a fraction, and as a ratio, that would be 60 to 100. And we'll just skip the model. Okay, continuing on, what would 600% be? Move the decimal over twice. So that'd be 6. So 600% is actually 600 out of 100, which is actually more than 100. And so the ratio 600 to 100, because 600% is more than 100%. All right, here's a normal one, 32%. What would it look like as a decimal? That would be 0.32. So you see the numbers are very similar. The decimal just moves twice to the left, and that's how you get the decimal. As a fraction, that's 32 out of 100. As a ratio, 32 to 100. My fractions and ratios look a lot alike. Go ahead and flip over and try the back side. Continuing on with the table, I'll label the top just because it's not labeled. We had the percent, the decimal, the fraction, the ratio, and then it was the model. So what if they give you the decimal 0.55? What would that be as a percent? 55%. Now if you read this correctly, 55 hundredths, you can hear the fraction. 55 hundredths, and the ratio would be 55 out of 100. And we'll skip the model, but the model would be just shading in 55 out of 100. This one's different. They give you 9 over 10. Well, all of our fractions were always out of 100. Well, could we make 9 out of 10 something out of 100? So like as a ratio, I see 9 to 10, or could I make that 90 to 100? What did I do to get that ratio to be similar? I just took the fraction and I multiplied both times 10. Instead of 9 and 10, I have 90 over 100. If you want to make the fraction bigger, it makes the ratio bigger. 9 to 10, 90 out of 100, that's 90 hundredths, so you would write it as 0.90. Some people don't put the 0 here. And as a percent, 90 out of 100 would be 90%. The last one, the model, they have shaded, what's it, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 shaded out of 10. So as a ratio, I see 7 to 10. But what if I want it to be out of 100? Because that's how our percents are out of 100. Instead of 7 to 10, that would be 70 out of 100. As a fraction, you could put 7 to 10 or 70 out of 100. Once you know what it is out of 100, 70 hundredths as a decimal, you can hear it. Again, the 0 sometimes is implied, which is 70%. So what you should notice is that you want your fractions out of 100, because then your decimals go to hundredths place, and then percents out of 100. The next example, she shares with the class that 70% of the students got an A. So we got 70% got an A on the English vocabulary quiz. If Mr. Brown has 100 students, could we create a model to show how many of the students received an A on the quiz? So 100 students is like the total amount of kids that there are. And we know the percent that got an A, then we're trying to figure out, so how many students is it that got an A? So as a percent, we know out of 100. So I'm going to take this a step further on this problem. If 70% got an A, then what percent or how many students did not get an A? So